Oh, a shower of babies. Nice.
Yeah, I hope it's a full shower of babies. It would be really embarrassing if it was only like three or four.
And welcome back to another episode of Exposing Ourselves. I'm Travis Ritchie, and this is episode 38. This is the show where we expose each other to new things. Matt, a big music fan, will assign me one of his favorite music artists to listen to each week, and I, a movie buff, will give him one of my favorite films, and we come together on this podcast to discuss it all. And with me, as always, is my very good friend,
Matt Runquist. Hey, Travis. This week I watched the movie Looper, and you listened to the band Paramore.
I sure did. I noticed that you took the time to take a drink while I was doing that whole intro. And, yeah. And you didn't ask me how I was doing.
I try to avoid it when I can, but sometimes it's just automatic.
Oh, it's just automatic. Yeah, I always do appreciate it when you do say it, and it is a challenge for me to not answer when you ask me how I'm doing. So I do appreciate the thoughtfulness of also not asking me.
I'm just thoughtful no matter what. That's how I am.
You are. You can't help yourself. Anyway, so how was your week? You performed today.
This week I'm not just a music fan. I'm also a musical producer, a music maker. Yeah. Just got back from the Battle of the Bands like an hour ago. It was really fun. Had a great time. I feel like I did pretty well. I did not win the Battle of the Bands, but that's okay because it was a fundraiser for Girls Rock Milwaukee, and that went very well. So very happy.
Nice.
I loved all the other bands that were part of the competition. It was a lot of fun. I got to hear a lot of music that I had not otherwise heard before. It was a really good experience.
That's awesome. I'm so glad. It sounds like, oh man, what a fun day it sounds like. I'm glad you had that for yourself. Anything else big going on this week?
Big. Oh yeah, it's a big week. My birthday is coming up next Saturday. And so we're going to be going up to the Twin Cities, a place you actually know pretty well from your time in college.
That's where we met.
Yeah, that's where we met. Going up to the Minnesota Renaissance Fair on Friday, and then we have a baby shower on Sunday to go to.
Oh, a shower of babies.
Yep.
Nice.
Yeah, I hope it's a full shower of babies. It would be really embarrassing if it was only like three or four, You're like, well, that was disappointing.
I was just telling my mom, I think, the story of how you and I met. And, because she listens to the podcast. And so she was commenting that we have a fine rapport. And I was talking to her. I told her that you were one of the very first people I met when I went to college.
Yeah.
Maybe the first person I met. I don't know. Or at least the first person I met that of any substance. Subsequence? Consequence.
Subsequent substance and consequence, I think, is how that goes.
Consequential substance.
Yes.
Words are hard.
They sure are. Yeah.
But I went downstairs to check out the pool table, and there you were playing some pool, and I played
there.
With
I
you.
was playing pool. Yeah, it's funny. I had I loved to play pool when I was in high school, and nobody I knew had a pool table, so I didn't get to do it very often. When we got to the dorm, there was a pool table in the basement, and so for the first week or so, I played pool a lot. And then almost never played the entire rest of the time. It was like...
Well, because you explored and had other things to do. Like there was ping pong over at the Student Union and Virtua Fighter.
Yep. I think I played a little bit of pool over at the Student Union, too. I don't know why I paid over there when I could have done it for free at
when there was a free one?
Yeah.
No, I don't know. I do remember also video games a lot. So you introduced me to Civilization, which I think came on something like 4 3.5-inch floppy disks. Or 8.
Yeah, it was a lot. I think that one might have been
discs.
5 or 6. Yeah, it was a big one.
Yeah, and you had to install it. I remember I was so excited to share. You had a 486 Intel 486 computer in your dorm room. And I got myself a Pentium 75 megahertz computer from Best Buy like halfway through my freshman year. Yeah. I was so excited for it.
Screaming speed.
So fast. 8 whole megabytes of RAM.
Yeah.
And one of them was shared for video. And an 850 megabyte hard drive.
Really? It was that big?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty big for the era.
And I very quickly upgraded that to a 1.2 gigabyte hard drive.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
you know the band files that I work with now for when I'm recording are around a gigabyte a piece.
Right? Yeah, they are.
For each one of my like little 4-minute songs.
It is crazy how like willy-nilly we are about data these days. I mean, I do remember keeping track of the cost of data, like as far as hard drives go, and it used to be like $100 a gig was a good like estimate of how, and now it's like $100 a terabyte for an external drive is what you can. Less than that. I bought an 8 terabyte drive for something like $250 or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, nice.
Ugh. Crazy. Anyway, my week was pretty much a little bit of limbo, like emotional limbo for me. Nothing that I was so concerned with last week has been resolved. The strike is still going on, although by the time you listen to this, dear listener, it might be over. There's some promising activity going on right now as we record this. And I'm still waiting to hear about Coco's insurance. So it's just that I've got that big, Coco debt hanging over my head at the moment that has not been dealt with. So, but otherwise, it was a fine week. Certainly time helped me become less acutely frustrated than I was last week. So
yeah, time does have that effect a little bit. So
yeah, sure. I did enjoy our assignments this week, so I'm extremely happy to get into them. But before we do that, one little note that relates to one recent episode. Did you hear about Sufjan Stevens?
Yes, he had. Oh gosh, tell me.
He was diagnosed with Guillain-Barré syndrome.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah.
And so he basically woke up one day and had lost the ability to walk.
Yeah.
And so he was taken to the emergency room, and he's in the hospital, I think, now. And so he is last I read, he is supposed to make a pretty full recovery, but it's just going to take time because he has to learn how to walk again.
Yeah.
And I think that's just so crazy.
A friend of mine, her daughter suffered from Guillain-Barré at like 2.5 or 3 years old, and very much had to relearn how to walk and all that good things. So.
Well, that's an interesting thing. So so it's not just older people, and Sufjan isn't old; he's our age.
Yeah.
So he's like 48. So I guess age is not really an influence on that.
Yeah, age is not really the thing for that one.
Wow. So. Okay. Well, that's good. That's interesting to learn. But I thought that was very interesting, considering I had just learned about him, and and to have that happen, show up on my newsfeed was surprising. So enjoy your health while you got it, folks, because you never know.
We are not promised tomorrow, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm. We are not promised tomorrow. That's interesting. I like that. That. So why don't we today get into the meat?
Yeah, let's get into the meat. Let's switch it up a little bit this week and go with the music first. Yeah, let's go with the music first. Tell me about Paramore. Tell you about Terry Paramore. Well,
that's not what I said at all.
Close enough. Paramore is an American rock band. I would characterize them, at least their early stuff, as pop punk. They're a little more wide ranging now. They're actually only a 3-piece. They don't have a bassist, and their lead singer is Hayley Williams, and she was only 16 when Paramore started.
When was that?
That was in 2004. So she was born in 1988. They were formed in 2004. Their debut album came out in 2005, and they've released a bunch of albums since then. And they're all pretty darn good. So I gave you a playlist that really spans their entire career. One of the things that I really like about Paramore is, like I said, they're rooted in sort of the pop punk tradition, but they bring in a lot of sort of different styles of music and, unusual rhythms and things that I feel like keep it fresh for me. So Hayley Williams is a powerhouse of a vocalist, and they're really good. Yeah. What'd you think, Travis?
So I will say that I enjoyed this a bit more than other recent bands that we've listened to or musical artists. And It's interesting because one of the things I loved was the variety, and that's definitely something that I have poked at as a detriment to some of our recent listens, right?
Yeah.
And but this band or this group feels like they have a lot of interesting variety. So the second song on the playlist was, do you remember what it was called? I
I don't
should have
remember the
looked it up.
name of it. I'm sorry.
That's all right. I'll pull it up right here. It's Ain't It Fun?
Ain't It
And
Fun?
so it
Yeah.
comes off of their self-titled album Paramore, and it is a fairly recognizable song. I think I remember hearing it at some point in the past, but this time through, it was struck by a similarity to the person that popped into my mind was Janet Jackson, and I was like,
Okay.
oh, this seems like very like Janet Jackson-y, except maybe a little evolved, right?
Okay.
And I a couple of times as I was listening to it, I had that sense like, oh, this sounds a lot like so and so, and I liked that. I liked that they had a different vibe in each song, and this was not an album, so it's not like I couldn't really judge it in those terms, but it was nice to hear that they didn't just have one thing, like they didn't have one sound or one type of song that they played. Still Into You is the song that I definitely was aware of before this, and it was also a lot of fun. It was jamming, and I think a lot of their songs had a lot of energy and a lot of like you said last week, they're really good at doing hooks,
Yeah.
and I'll definitely agree with that. And so they were they were all kind of unique. There was one maybe thing that I didn't. It's not that I didn't love it. It's just a question that popped into my head. Like I wonder if you randomly heard a Paramore song, could you identify it as a Paramore song? Because I did kind of get a sense that I don't know if there was a if she's a good singer. The what's her name again?
Hayley Williams.
Hayley Williams. She's definitely a good singer. The band is definitely more than competent. Like they're very very good, but I don't know if they had their own distinct sound. Do you know? Like if you listen to a Queen song, you can tell it's a Queen song even if you've never heard it before. And I don't know if that would be true with these guys. Do you get what I'm saying?
I do get what you're saying. I don't know. I mean, I do think Hayley Williams' voice is pretty I think it stands out, right? It's not terribly different from a lot of the female vocalists out there, but there is sort of an edge to her voice, and I think that she is a better singer than this style of music usually calls for.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I feel like that stands out quite a bit. The instrumentation, I think there is not like a signature sound that this guitarist does. There's lots of
I think
funk influences and different influences, and I think they experiment with sound a lot, and so
Yep.
that can contribute, I think, to what you're getting at.
yeah. And all that is great, absolutely. But I think what I was finding a hard time finding is the connective tissue,
Yeah.
right? What's the connective tissue of this band that is always there despite their doing different types of songs.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and I mean, for me, it's really just the vocal, right?
Mm-hmm.
The drummer is obviously super competent in a bunch of different styles. The guitarist is the same way, and so that does give them a lot of ground to cover. But yeah, it definitely does not necessarily, until I hear her voice, I don't know that it's a Paramore song. And it's funny, the song I gave you first is the first single off their newish album. I think this is a
interesting.
2023 album. It's called This Is Why.
I was wondering why you put that song first because it wasn't my favorite.
Because it's it's a little bit funky, right? It's a little bit odd. There's some strange rhythms in it, and there's not really a traditional verse. And then this chorus pops in that's kind of it's a chorus, but it's not like the most chorusy thing. I think the reason that I put it first is because I wanted you to hear what Paramore sounds like now.
Sure.
Because if you listened to their 2007 album that Misery Business is on, I think it's called Riot or something like that.
Yep.
I think that there is a lot of sameness on that album. There's not a lot of variety on that album. And so I wanted you to get the sense that the reason that this band is still around and active, and like they just did an arena tour this summer, the reason that they're doing that and able to do that is because they're constantly pushing their sound in new directions.
I see. And so do you think that so they're
I mean, in the early 2000s, like pop punk was a huge thing, right? You've got your, Avril Lavigne and a bunch of and then a whole mess of 3 and 4 guy, bands that all kind of played what sounded like the same thing. And Paramore's Riot fits right into that, but they've really, really come a long way since then.
Okay, so their variety, or their ability to be have variety within their sound, is maybe more album to album than within an album.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, yeah, that makes some sense. I did have a good time listening to this, and I think that it would be, at least this playlist is something that I would put on in a bunch of different scenarios. It checked pretty much all the boxes that I normally want. It felt fun. It felt the lyrics were good. The instrumentation was very good, and of course, as you said, Haley's vocals are fantastic. So. She's one of those things, like using my karaoke metaphor. Like if I went to karaoke and heard her sing, I'd be like, "Oh damn, you should be bigger than this."
Yeah. I'd love to see her sing karaoke. I think that would be really fun, actually. I'll bet she would have a great time. You called out the lyrics, and I would definitely agree with you. They do a really nice job of that sort of balancing act that you have to do as a lyricist, which is, you want to talk about the issue that you're talking about, but you don't want to do it in so direct a way that it's like cheesy or, like We Didn't Start the Fire or something, where it's just like a list of like, these are issues that I'm concerned about, right?
Right.
And I feel like they really do a nice job lyrically of, I know what the songs are about, but I'm not being like hit over the head with it.
Yeah, a song. They have, each song has a story, and it's a bit poetic, but it's not overly poetic. It's not like high school English student poetry that tries to be a little too deep. We've run into that in the past with some of our bands.
For sure. New Pornographers comes to mind. I'm sure all of that has a meaning, but I have no idea what it is. This metaphor is a metaphor for metaphors. Oh, okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Deep.
Yeah.
Deep. And very, what's the word you always use? For those bands that were, they wanted to be authentic. So, yeah. Being deep is authentic.
Yeah, being deep is authentic.
Being deep and non-understandable. It makes me authentic.
Exactly. So that's not Paramore at all. So Paramore has really connected with a lot of people. Like I said, they did an arena tour this summer. They actually toured with a band called the Linda Lindas that I'll probably give you at some point as well.
Okay, great.
But I missed that show. I thought
they were accessible, and I liked that.
Yeah.
I don't know what the problem is with being accessible.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, right? It like accessibility up to a point, and then, and maybe you don't have this particular problem, but there is, again, the authenticity issue. If you're accessible to too many people, that feels like a negative to a lot of a certain type of music fan. And I think I would say a lot of the gatekeepers of music. So
yeah, no, that I get that too. And I was wondering if their inspiration, or their feel that they were inspired by others, if that was a positive or a negative for them as as they were kind of coming onto the scene. What do you think?
I think I'm missing your point.
Well, like the Janet Jackson song where I was like, oh yeah, this sounds very similar to something.
Yeah, you don't want it to necessarily come off as pastiche. No, I think that
but it's also not too new, right? In order to be like,
Yeah.
I guess most music is an evolution of something else, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's funny, there have been these lawsuits recently. I think the Ed Sheeran one is the really high profile one, where lawyers will point out a really surface level similarity in the chordal structure of a song and then claim that somehow the copyright in the older song, when
sure, yeah.
The truth of
the matter is... But then they don't go back and find an older song that song was...
Yeah.
That was repeating.
Yeah, and the truth of the matter is in, Western music, there's 12 notes, right?
Yep.
And so it's not that
many ways
it's not that no song ever steals from another, but that the bar needs to be higher than, they share the same chords and a similar melody. Yeah, they do, because there's only so many places that you can go. So
yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes real sense. I could see definitely a couple of these songs going on my boyfriend playlist, and I would put this on play sometime. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, you did a good job with this playlist.
Thank you very much. Would you like to give this a rating?
Yeah, I would. Not just because it's required by the format of this podcast. I would genuinely enjoy to rate this band, and I will thus rate them a. Am I buying myself time? I don't know.
I honestly don't know what you're doing right now.
No, I think I'm gonna go with a 7. I think, and this is a thing where I could be that I again, kind of like Sufjan Stevens, I could allow for this to go up in the future as I become more familiar with the band. But I do think that feeling that I had that they don't have a signature sound hurt them for me a little bit.
Okay.
But yeah, so 7 I think is pretty fair.
7 is very fair. And you know what? It's so fair that I think it's going to be my rating for Paramore as well. Yep. I really like this music, but I am not like the world's biggest Paramore fan. I like them, but I don't, I listened to their new album a couple of times, then I kind of put it down. So this is a 7 for me. Solidly positive, but not like a must. I got to remember to listen to Paramore this week.
Interesting. Do you have, and that raises a question for me, because you listen to music in a different way than I do. Do you have albums that you're like, oh, I got to listen to this album this week? It's been too long since I've heard.
Yeah, absolutely. There are things that just pop into my head and I'm like, oh man, I mean, the classic album, and this is one of my top 10 albums of all time, but I'm like, man, I haven't listened to Graceland in forever. And so, I gotta listen to Graceland.
What is forever regularly. For you? Is that like a couple of months or a couple of years?
Maybe it's a year or two sometimes. I mean, I listen to a lot of music and a wide variety of music, which means that it's actually hard to listen to things more than 2 or 3 times. So you don't listen to things more than 2 or 3 times because we're on to the next one. And that's kind of how I am as well, just in like I'll probably listen to, 12 or 15 albums this week and you'll listen to one.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So you'll have a couple of those. How many of those 12, 15 albums are new in a week?
Probably half of them are
really
not necessarily new to me. I think I misunderstood your question.
Oh.
New to me, it'll probably be 2 or 3. Yeah.
Okay, but still, that's a lot.
I thought you meant like new music, like the last year or two.
Okay, but that does give me still a good insight into your listening. And so, like, even just to have 2 or 3 actually new albums, but then another 2 or 3 that are, or maybe half of the remaining will be newish, recent albums, and then a bunch of classics. So that's really fascinating to me. I kind of am maybe the same way with movies, in that I'll just put on an old movie sometime, and that's kind of comforting to me. But ultimately, when I'm walking around doing my thing, just having the headphones on, I'm listening to podcasts.
Yeah, for
so
sure.
it's all talky talk.
Talk.
Yeah, it's interesting. I listened to a show called Marketplace, which is on NPR, which is obsessively a show about money, even though I have no earthly business listening to a show about money. But I've been listening to it since like 2006.
Okay.
And I love it. It's actually a show about the economy, and since the economy touches pretty much everything, they do touch on many different topics. But it's a great show. It's a great show. Yeah, and then of course a bunch of science podcasts like Science Friday and Scientific American.
Sciencey stuff.
Yeah, I love stuff like that. So, if there's any science musicians that you come across that you want to expose me to, that might be interesting.
Yeah, I don't know what that would entail, but maybe I'll try and keep an eye out.
I think they're probably like, I was just listening to a thing about science-based comedians recently, so I'm sure there must be science-based bands,
Well, there's definitely like nerdy bands that talk about
like
things
They Might Be
that.
Giants has a couple of nerdy songs, and I don't know, stuff like that might be fun. Cool. Well, we rated, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
Oh,
yeah.
Do I need to tell you about the movie now?
You need to tell me about the movie now.
All right, well, I had you watch Looper, which is a 2012 science fiction action thriller movie written and directed by Rian Johnson, who previously had done the movie Brick with Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and then went on after this to do Star Wars The Last Jedi, which is the middle of the sequel movies. And then he finally had his, what I think, really big hit with Knives Out, which was a murder mystery, and then its sequel. He also did a bunch of episodes of Breaking Bad, a couple of really highly regarded ones, like Ozymandias he directed, and Fly. I don't know if you ever watched Breaking Bad.
I did not.
And it's a perfect show, my man. And so yeah, he's an interesting guy. I don't love all of his stuff. I didn't like any of the Star Wars sequels. Particularly, but it's the one that you say you like the best of the three.
Oh, it's the only good one. Yes.
Okay, and I differ on my opinion of good in this case, but moving back to this particular movie, it's I wanted to revisit it because I saw it back in the day, and it's a time travel movie, which I have a particular soft spot in my heart for time travel. I'm going into production next month on a time travel comedy of my own, and I love when you can look at the I don't know, I can't call it science, but the genre of time travel and do it in a different way. So in this movie, Joseph Gordon-Levitt plays a looper, which is basically a paid assassin who is paid to kill people who are sent back from the future, because in the future it's too difficult to hide bodies, I guess, and time travel has been invented, but it's been outlawed, so only villains or criminals use it, and they need to get rid of bodies. So what they do is they'll take a person and put it in a time machine and send it back to a particular moment, and the looper is there ready to instantly shoot that person and get rid of the body. And then the idea is that at some point, their older self will come back from 30 years in the future, and they have to kill their older self, and it's called closing their loop. And at one point, his older self is sent back, and his older self is played by Bruce Willis, and his older self doesn't want to be killed, and so he manages to thwart the assassination and get out, and it's kind of the repercussions of that. And it's an interesting movie. It's complex, which I love, but not confusing. Like, it's a confusing kind of concept, but I thought it made sense to me. And they do a good job of kind of laying out the rules of this universe and the rules of time travel. And the cast is amazing. In addition to the two I mentioned, Emily Blunt comes in as the mother of a young child. Her son is played by this kid who is like amazing, like as a young actor. And Paul Dano shows up, and Piper Perabo shows up, and Jeff Daniels shows up as this guy who is basically the kingpin of modern day insert name of city here. So I guess it's Kansas City is what I don't
Is
know.
that really what it is? Is Kansas
I think
City?
so.
Oh,
Yeah, it
wow.
doesn't really make sense, but anyway. So I'll talk about it more. But what did you think of it?
What did I think of it? I quite liked it. Yeah, all of the things that you said about it are true. I wouldn't call this easy to follow, but it establishes its rules and largely follows them. And that's kind of all you can ask of a
Mm-hmm.
movie like this that's based on time travel, right? Time travel is kind of a genre of its own, and it's funny. I was just thinking about this as you were introducing it. Time travel is not, because it's such a trope now in science fiction, that it's almost not really science fiction anymore, because what a time travel movie has to do is sort of engage with all of the literature and ideas about time travel that have already gone before. It
Mm-hmm.
has to sort of pick and choose, like, how does it handle paradoxes, and how does it handle the fact that history hasn't been solved if time
Mm-hmm.
travel is real. And the ways in which this movie does that are really good, but I would say they're almost more literary than scientific, right?
Hmm.
So, yeah.
I did
But
some thinking about that, by the way, and thinking about some of the old time travel, how we've gotten there as far. And you go back to like Mark Twain and a Yankee in King
Connecticut
Arthur's
Yankee.
court,
Yeah.
which like that guy gets bonked in the head and just magically appears in the past. And so it was more magic. Whereas then once H.G. Wells comes along with the time machine, it becomes a more scientific approach to time travel. But you're right. Like there are a bunch of different ways to do it. There's I mean, even Back to the Future did a couple of different things with time travel that that worked and didn't work depending on how you look at it. But this movie has, yeah, it does it has kind of its own take on time travel that I really liked. One of them is that if you have someone from the future in the past, and there's a scene where one of the loopers, kind of to illustrate what happens if you don't close your loop, one of the loopers fails to close his loop. And so what they do is they catch the young version of himself, and in order to get the old version of himself to come in, they basically start torturing the young version of himself. And the things they do to the young version, who is from today, immediately show up on the old version who is from the future. And
Yeah.
so like they chop off the guy's finger and all of a sudden he's got one less finger, and
Yeah.
then another less finger. And like
Hmm.
it's shot really interestingly.
Yeah, it is. I think that is a really neat concept, and it of course establishes the end of the movie very well.
Mhm.
Um, you know, yeah. Anyways, I was gonna get into the acting. I really loved Joseph Gordon-Levitt in this. It's funny because is he wearing a prosthetic?
Yes.
Okay, yeah,
Yes,
he's
he
wearing a
had like 3
prosthetic.
hours of makeup in order to look
Yeah,
like a young Bruce Willis.
yeah, but he does a really magical job of, like, the prosthetic almost feels a little like gilding the lily at times,
Hmm.
because he's so good at that sort of, the way that Bruce Willis will toss a line off and just delivering it in the same way with like the same physical presence,
Yeah.
that it almost felt a little odd to be like, why does Joseph Gordon-Levitt just like looks weird rather than
Yeah, yeah.
necessarily like Bruce Willis? Um,
Yeah,
but
he clearly did a lot of work and research and preparation for
yeah,
character, like,
yeah,
and that must be interesting to do all of that to be like a person, and any number of actors have done the same thing. If you're playing
hmm,
Ray Charles or Jackie Robinson or whatever, you're doing all that work, but he then had to sit across the table from the guy he's mimicking
yeah. Yeah, and
and
he's,
act with
and
him.
he's like, "Hey, here's your acting tics. I hope you don't mind that I like pointed
Yes.
them out to you." you know.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I'm sure Bruce Willis doesn't care. But it was also interesting to see Bruce Willis in another kind of time travel movie. You know, he did 12 Monkeys back in the day, and to see two different kind of takes on him traveling back in time
Hmm.
to accomplish something was fairly interesting too.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Emily Blunt was fantastic in this.
She's always
Really,
fantastic.
yeah,
She's
but she was really like. It's funny because the movie becomes a different movie for a while in the
about halfway
middle.
through, it changes. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's a thing I wanted to talk about that with because they foreshadow when Joseph Gordon-Levitt is kind of in a down place. He goes to the essentially the a whorehouse, I guess is what it is.
Yeah.
And so, but he has his favorite there that he goes to all the time, and he's there with her, and he's not being sexual with her. He just has her running her fingers through his hair, and he says he'll rescue her from this place, right? And she mentions that she's got her son and all that, and it kind of like foreshadows just by mentioning that she has a son. I'm like, oh, that's the son from the because I'd seen it before, and I remembered that there was a kid, and I was like, oh, but it doesn't turn out to be her and her son.
Right.
But they do still have something to do with the story, and I thought that that was fairly well done.
Yeah,
For
for
you know,
sure. For
the
sure.
foreshadowing of this movie and setting things up and executing them and paying them off is really quite well done.
Yeah, no, I really liked that. There, so you say this movie doesn't make you work too hard, but I think you have a higher tolerance for this type of thing than I really do.
Probably. It is
I
just kind of how my mind works.
I don't I do struggle sometimes to really enjoy movies that like pose a big question and then take a really long time to pay it off. For me, there is a moment when Joseph Gordon-Levitt falls off a building and it's not exactly clear what happens to him right away because we are then shown the loop where he where he does close his loop and live the extra 30 years. And that really jarred me because we've already seen that he doesn't close his loop, right? And then we see that he does close his loop, and I feel like I understand the answer to what happened there, but I also don't feel like the movie really showed us or told us. I also don't understand why, from a structural standpoint, you don't show that loop first. Why you don't?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think I know why. I think the interesting because the story isn't really about him spending those 30 years wasting his life and then needing to be recovered and finding this woman and all that. I think the story is about the young guy, the young version, seeing himself without. Usually they put like a what is it called, a mask over over the people that they're going to have to shoot. So when they show up, when they appear to be shot, they're bound, their hands are tied, and they've got masks on. And suddenly, with this guy, he suddenly shows up and he's got no mask on and his hands aren't tied. And Joseph Gordon-Levitt's like, "What the hell?" And the guy looks at him and he sees that it's himself. That's the first time around. And I think that's the important story to carry forward. So that's why they started there. But then they kind of flashed back and showed how that happened, which I thought was important. But
yeah, I guess for
you just didn't
me,
like it structurally.
Yeah, structurally, it really did. I kept waiting for for him to be thrown into the loop again, or like it was very, very confusing because most of this movie is not out of order. And so for that particular thing to be out of order, really, I spent a lot of time that I should have spent enjoying the movie, chewing on that and wondering when we were going to get a satisfactory resolution to it. And we didn't. I kind of had to figure that out for myself. And I feel reasonably confident that that's the answer, but I don't feel like
Okay, so what's the answer? What?
Well, no, just that was so. I mean, the idea is that there's like you go through this loop multiple times, and that he had to at least once kill himself in order to kick off whatever's going on.
Right. Yeah, the
But
Bruce Willis character is the guy that successfully killed his older self
right, yeah,
30 years ago.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that just my brain is just sitting there chewing on that rather than like enjoying the movie. Um,
And you don't
so
enjoy that.
I don't. No, no,
Okay.
I don't enjoy that
That
at
is a
all.
difference between you and I think, as I like to kind of mull over those kind of things and work them out. It's like a puzzle.
Yeah, yeah. Um, the other thing that I will say is this shares a little bit of DNA with Inception in that it does a little bit of like world building where it sets up some arbitrary rules for itself and then it's like, oh no, here's some conflict arising out of the arbitrary rules for ourselves, right? The whole thing about closing the loops and people have like it's not that that's not explained, but it doesn't feel super duper satisfactory to me. You know, for one thing, why don't they shoot the guys in the future and just send them back dead?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That feels
yeah,
like an
and
easier solution, right?
for sure. And there is a yep, I agree with you. And in fact, they say that it's impossible to hide a body in the future, or something like that, right?
Right.
And I'm thinking, well,
But it's not impossible to hide a time machine?
well, that's interesting. Yeah, and they do kind of do a little like story based hand waving, like they're like
Yeah.
all this information we're getting about the future is kind of secondhand.
Yeah.
And so, but they show that Bruce Willis's wife gets shot in the future.
Yeah.
And you're like, but wait, what about that body?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
What did they do there? Yeah.
so like, did they just burn the house to hide that body? Because that seems you know.
easier than using a apparently extremely illegal time machine. Yeah. So, yeah, again, and this isn't
Yep.
one of those movies that made me constantly irritated with its own thing, but I just noticed that like it doesn't follow or I mean it sets up an arbitrary obstacle for itself and then it's like, "Oh no." And I'm like,
okay, yeah, I mean, I get that, and it doesn't stand up 100% to scrutiny when you really look at the
yeah.
I don't want to say the
But
science of it, but
no, but again, I'm not gonna harp on that. It didn't ruin the movie for me or anything. There was a big part of me that's like, man, this would be so much easier if they just shot these guys in the future and sent them back that way, you know?
that's interesting. I don't know if they ever answered that. I wonder if that might be part of the new, in the deleted scene or something where they say about can't transport dead tissue or whatever. I don't know,
something like that, right?
Yeah, there is one thing that I didn't like about this movie, and that is my penchant for a hero's journey was not fulfilled. And what I mean by that is that there was a way Joseph Gordon-Levitt could have survived. Because at the end of the movie, in order to like Bruce Willis, old Joe has got Emily Blunt in his sights, and he's going to shoot her. And shooting her is what causes her son, who is a powerful telekinetic, to basically go on a rampage and become a huge crime boss, right? Mm-hmm. So in order to prevent that, young Joe turns his gun on himself and shoots himself in the heart. And as soon as he does that, old Joe vanishes.
Yeah.
I feel like he could have just shot himself in the hand or shot his hand off or something like that.
Well,
like,
and that's actually what I predicted was going to happen. I was like, oh, he's going to shoot his hand off, and then he blows himself away. And I was like, that's more final.
Yeah. Yeah. It certainly is. But I like, as a fan of a hero's journey, I didn't love that.
Yeah, I can see that. I think there is. I understand the character's logic there, right? That he is concerned that this child's experiences are what cause him to go on a rampage in the future. And it's never really made clear what this, I can't remember the special name of that guy, but
The
that
Rainmaker.
the Rainmaker, yes. It's not exactly clear that the Rainmaker is another crime boss for sure, right? Like somebody says something about it, but that doesn't really make any sense. Like maybe he's like like a Judge Dredd type who's like a lawman who's trying to kill all these criminals by making them close their loops. I mean, there's all kinds of things. The other thing is, well, I was gonna give it a little crap for like, why do they have to close the loops? Well, like, I don't understand why you can't just retire, let these guys retire. Like, it feels.
I think they do have a line about that. Probably.
Yeah, they do, and it feels all very hand wavy. It's like, I don't know, if you have such a problem getting rid of bodies, you could save yourself a lot of bodies by just not killing your assassins after 30 years. And why 30 years? Like that feels super like I guess the idea is that they can get old. Right?
Oh, well, 30 years is the time travel window. So the idea is that the time travel device in the future and the location in the past move together through time. So it always sends someone back exactly 30 years.
Ah, okay.
So that's where that comes from.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. But ultimately I thought that the world building was pretty good. I really liked that the world it sets up, it takes place in something like 2045 or something like that.
Yeah.
And being a 10-year-old movie now, putting it in a time that's still 20 years off, I thought was interesting because that time feels like it's a little bit future-y, but not super future-y. And also to think about how much has happened in the last 20 years. Sure, I can see time travel being invented in 20 years, with AI working on it and all that. I don't know. But also humanity's having a hard time of things. And I like that it wasn't some gleaming future. All the cars are kind of like, retrofitted with rebreathers and to, recycle fumes and to use solar panels for that little extra energy boost. And that was all good stuff. I really liked the...
Yeah, I don't want you to think that I didn't like this movie. I liked this movie a lot. The world building was fantastic. I will say my favorite part of this movie is the scenes on the farm. I think the way that young Joe gets to know, unfortunately, I can't remember the name of the character, but Sid gets to know Sid. No, Sid's the Rainmaker, isn't he?
Yeah, Sid's the kid. Oh, so the woman's name is Sarah. So Sarah's the mom.
The way that young Joe gets to know Sarah, and they develop trust between them, and they eventually sleep together. Yeah. All feels like really natural and really well observed and really dramatic in a way that you don't usually get in a movie like this, because it doesn't, for whatever reason, they allowed him to make this movie without being like, well, you got to have another action scene. It's been 8 minutes, And so all of that is really good, and it's beautifully shot. And the sense of place that you have about this farm is so good. The fact that she's growing sugar cane rather than corn is like, what's up, climate change? Right?
Yeah.
Like that's
sugar
like
cane
a little
in Kansas.
Yeah, because climate change, and so Kansas is now crazy warm compared to what it used to be. Everything about that is just really, really good. The way that she puts on a really brave front to drive off what are called vagrants, but she doesn't actually want to kill anyone, because I think she has a fair amount of sympathy for the plight of the vagrants. I think she understands, like the best people do, that there but for the grace of God go I, right? Like, this could happen to any one of us. And so, murdering them in the streets is just not not on.
Yeah,
So.
even if they're trespassing. Yeah, I agree with that. And I thought that I liked how it mirrored old Joe's love, the way he meets his love. He basically, she nurses him back to health and helps him through withdrawal, which is the same thing that Sarah does for young Joe. And so even though she's going to be replacing those memories, she's a good substitute, which I really like that. And I have to say, the kid who played Sid, his name's Pierce Gagnon, Gagnon, Gagnon. Man, that kid was creepy, and I believed his power. And I'm like, it's one of those kids. And I just, as an actor myself, I've seen videos of myself acting from, age 20, and I feel like I have become a pretty good actor, right? And I was decent back in the day, but I was not great. And to see the talent that this kid has at 10 years old, just drives me nuts to know that there are children out there like that who could act that well.
Yeah, he did really well.
Worth checking out just for his performance, in my opinion. But yeah. Well, we're running short on time. You wanna any last words on this before you rate it?
I don't have any last words on it, but rating it is going to be really tough.
Right.
I have gone. You know what? I came into this wanting to give it a 9, simply on the basis of my enjoyment of it, and despite my nitpicking some details, I really, really enjoyed it. I will watch this again at some point. I loved Joseph Gordon-Levitt in this. I loved Emily Blunt. Okay, you know what? I'll say it. I wasn't going to say anything. I did not love Bruce Willis in this. I thought he was... Yeah, I thought he was fine. fine.
Yeah, well, Bruce Willis has been fine for many years.
Yeah. So this is a 9 for me. I'm going to give it a 9.
Considering the movies around that time, that the other movies that Bruce Willis was doing, like Die Hard sequels and whatnot, and other direct-to-video stuff, I think this was a pretty amazing performance we got out of him in 2012.
Yeah.
Just put a little shade on Bruce Willis. I'm sorry. At some point he was paying the bills, and he did this because he thought it was a really great movie, which it was. And you gave it how much? A what?
I gave it a 9.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I was going to go back and forth on this. I almost went down to an 8, but because of some of my nitpicky things. But ultimately, it was so much fun, and there are many, many extraordinary things about this movie, and so given that, I'm willing to accept some of the less extraordinary things. So,
all right. Yeah, that's
definitely a good
pretty
one.
much how I feel about it.
I'm glad I rewatched it. I didn't remember liking it that much.
Yeah.
So, Matt. Well, what do you got for me for next?
Next week. Yeah, next week. It's 7 days, so it's a week. I know that you haven't heard of this one, but have you ever heard of Screaming Females?
No, I haven't.
Well, I actually, dear listener, I did actually ask Travis if he had any tolerance for awesome guitar solos this week. There is a young guitarist in her 30s named Marissa Paternoster who, despite playing in a basically unknown band named Screaming Females, made Spin's list of the top 100 guitarists of the century because she is an absolute barn burner of a guitarist. And so I gave you the band Screaming Females. This is a playlist. It's some of my favorite of their songs. In addition to her being a really good guitarist, she's got a really powerful voice with a lot of vibrato. There is a song on here that is actually by Do you know the band Garbage?
I've heard of them.
Okay, the song you might know is "I'm Only Happy When It Rains."
Oh, I'm only happy when it rains. Yeah, sure.
Okay, so they actually had Screaming Females do a cover of the 10,000 Maniacs song "Because the Night." And it ends with probably a 2 or 2.5 minute guitar solo by Marissa Paternoster. And so I put the recorded track on the playlist, but if you can watch the video, it is unreal because you have all these very professional musicians. Garbage is like Butch Vig, all these like really big deal musicians, and they all basically just sit there while she just absolutely tears her guitar up. It's unreal to watch. It is so much fun. I know, like, I've showed the video to people who don't even like guitar solos, and they're like, that is nuts. So
great.
Anyways, this is Screaming Females. Tell me what you got.
That's great. I will listen to that, and I will watch the video. I did watch the video you recommended last week about the death of indie rock, and that was also fascinating. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
And so have you seen the movie Call Me By Your Name?
No, I have
So
not.
this is not a movie that I necessarily had on my list. I did watch it when it came out. It was a big Oscar contender back in 2017. So I think I got screeners for it for award season. It is a movie that stars Armie Hammer and Timothée Chalamet as so Timothée is a young man in Italy, and then Armie Hammer comes in as a older man. So it's like there's an age difference there, but it also is kind of a coming of age romantic drama with LGBT themes. And
Okay.
the reason the reason I want to have revisit it and have you watch it is because Sufjan Stevens actually did some of the music for it and did I think
Oh,
two
fun.
original songs for this movie. And so I want to revisit it in his honor this week. So
Awesome.
talk about that. But yeah, that's it.
Well, that is really, really cool. Hey, listener, if you want to expose yourselves to us, you can write to us at exposingourselvespodcast@gmail.com or look us up on Facebook at Exposing Ourselves. We'd love it if you dropped a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your
Yes,
podcasts.
please do that.
Please do that. It's really important. It helps us grow the podcast and continue producing episodes for you. And Travis.
Yeah, yeah. Well, before you say it, I want to say that
Oh God,
Keith
what did I do wrong?
Hampton did actually reach out to me, and this is my childhood friend Keith Hampton, who also is a name we will be hearing again in not too distant future. Reached out to me and said that he agrees with me on my uh, rating of the band that we listened to last week, which now I can't even remember who it was. It was Muse. No, not Muse. Who was it?
Oh man, I don't. The Beths? He didn't like the
No, the
Beths?
bits. Yeah, the bits.
Oh,
And I had the one song that I didn't like because I said it was too noisy. The sound within, something like that.
yeah.
And he reached out and said he agreed with me. So that's it. So you were going to say something?
Oh no, I'm not gonna say it now. No, I'm
Oh
mad at you.
well.
I'm mad at you now.
Oh, you are. Oh, don't be mad at me, because Matt,
Yeah?
I want to thank you for exposing yourself to me.
You're welcome, Travis. Thank you for exposing yourself to me.
You're most welcome, sir. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Bye.